What is up, everyone, and welcome to Men vs. Movies. I'm Griffin. As always, if this is your first time checking out one of our videos, consider hitting that subscribe button where we take on the best and worst of cinema on a weekly basis. And today we've got something special in store for you. We're going to be ranking the Marvel Cinematic Universe from worst to best. Myself and Brody, my co-host on the Words Are Not Enough, our James Bond podcast, we sat down and we had a conversation discussing these films for over 4 hours. Yeah, I know. And so because we don't want to burden you with 4 hours worth of content, we are going to split this up into 2 parts. This video, of course, being part 1, which will shortly be followed by part 2 in a matter of days. Because Avengers Endgame is the culmination of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's really the end of an era, we wanted to take the time to discuss these films and celebrate them and debate about some of the more controversial ones on this list. And so that's why these episodes are as long as they are. We wanted to give you guys some great insight and discussion. And so, without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy part 1 of our ranking of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, before we get into the list, I'm going to explain to you all how we're going to go about doing this. So what's going to happen is Brody is going to give his 22 through 16. I'm going to give my 22 through 16, and then we are going to talk about our respective 22 through 16. So we're not going to say 21, talk about why it's there, 20, talk about why it's there. We are going to do 22 through 16, just list them off, and then we'll have a discussion about that section. And then we will do the same for 15 through 11. And then when we get to the top 10, things are going to change. So Brody's going to do his bottom 3. I'm going to do my bottom 3. He's going to do his next 3. I'm going to do my next 3. And then we're going to trade one apiece until we get to our number 1 film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So hopefully that makes sense. And the last thing before we dive into this list, let us know what your ranking of the MCU is down in the comments section below. That is the most important thing. There are 22 films, so obviously everyone's lists are going to be drastically different from one another, but I'm curious to check those out. So,
oh man, there's more rules here than there were for time travel in Endgame. Holy shit!
Oh, is that a spoiler as to where the placement is? Oh, maybe. Who knows? Okay. All right, Brody, let's get into this thing. What is your 22 through 16?
Oh boy. Okay, this is gonna piss you off. But my 22 through 16 are 22, The Incredible Hulk. 21, Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Oh my!
20, Thor the Dark World. 19, Thor Ragnarok. 18, Captain Marvel. 17, Doctor Strange. And 16, Iron Man 2.
Interesting. So actually not as different from mine as you would think. The only one that I have to fucking lose my mind over is obviously Ant-Man and the Wasp. I am a staunch defender of those films, and we will get into that very much
Ant-Man
later
yet. There's been no Ant-Man yet.
Well, I know your opinion. I know your opinion's changed on that one. I'm curious as to where it places. But
yeah.
Okay. Before we continue that discussion, let's go through my 22 through 16. So coming in at number 22 for me is Thor: The Dark World. Coming in at 21, we have Captain Marvel. Number 20, Iron Man 2. 19, Doctor Strange. 18, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. 17, The Incredible Hulk. Oh, you know how I feel about that film. 17, The Incredible Hulk. And 16, we have Thor Ragnarok. Hey. So there you have it. Yeah, absolutely. There are our respective 22 through 16. So, okay. I know we're going to talk about this later on, but
Yep.
Why in the ever-loving hell is Ant-Man and the Wasp your second least favorite film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Because I feel like I could have never have watched it, and not only would I be would my opinion of the Marvel movies and the Marvel Cinematic universe, as a whole be unchanged, but I would probably be better for it if I hadn't seen Ant-Man and the Wasp. And it's not like a terrible movie, it's just Like, I mean, I don't think any of these movies are like legitimately very bad. I mean, that's kind of part of Marvel's magic, is that they've made 22 movies and there's been no real absolute disasters in there. There have been a couple of like really meh and bad ones, but never abysmal. And I think Ant-Man and the Wasp is the definition of a Marvel movie that, like, you know what, when people complain about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and they say, oh, they all kind of feel insignificant and pointless, and they all really, like, nothing really meaningful happens in them. That's how I feel about Ant-Man and the Wasp. I mean, even the most important aspect of the story, which was Janet coming back, felt like such an underwhelming and tangential point in the movie. The one thing Marvel movies have to do for me is make me feel something, and that movie made me feel nothing. And that's kind of like, if a Marvel movie can't make me feel something, then what's the point? You know what I mean?
I could not disagree more with that, because that was actually the film I rewatched last night in order to do this ranking. And I have to say, after watching Endgame, it made that movie better in my opinion. I already loved that movie, but I
think the most significant part of the movie is that post-credits stinger. Like,
no, I mean, like, I think so, but like the stuff they're talking about with the quantum realm and really kind of fleshing out that, like I said, I will get into that later on my list. But
you could have just watched Ant-Man and gotten all that information. I don't think
so. They go
learn
deeper in this one.
Important about the quantum realm other than you can survive in it, which
there was some
Ant-Man manages
lines
to
of
do
dialogue
in
that dropped
Ant-Man.
that.
I mean, but like, I don't know. That's not really enough for me to like the movie. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, it explained the quantum realm a bit more, which I don't think it did too much.
That's not even the main point of the film, for sure.
I think the only like emotional things that the movie has going for it are Scott and his daughter, which I think is better done in the first movie, and yeah, the Janet thing is supposed to be emotional, but I just couldn't give less of a shit because the movie...
Really?
The movie would have been better if it was just a Wasp movie, honestly. If it was just the Wasp and Ant-Man was in it, because he's one of the supporting characters, and because then you could have focused on Hope's relationship with her mother and her father, because it's in this movie. The movie feels so like obligated to like go, oh, Ant-Man's still in here, we got to focus on Ant-Man and his like home arrest and like all this sort of stuff.
Well, similar to the first one, they do a good job of paralleling the family relationships in both Scott's life and in Hank.
Well, I don't think there is a parallel in this one. I think this one is...
There is a little bit. Similar to the first one, it's kind of expanding upon that idea of like the fathers and the relationship with their child, and then also
he doesn't really have much of a relationship with his daughter in this one. Is like she's barely in the movie. She covers up for him once, but like that's the best part of the movie. But that's about it.
But what I was gonna say next was that it's also about kind of like the sins of the father, him kind of like kind of dealing with the repercussions of past decisions he's made. And I think I would actually argue that Hank Pym is the main character of this film. He gets such a boost from it.
He's not really... I like... Hank Pym's probably my favorite character in the movie, but I think if he is meant to be the main character, he's underserved by the story. Whereas like he's... I don't know, like his reunion with... I mean, I guess we're talking about this now, but like his reunion with Janet, as someone who I never used to read Ant-Man. Like I couldn't really give... But I read Avengers comics, and him and Janet are like a big deal in the Avengers comics. And
did you not see Michael Douglas breaking down into like massive tears? That was barely, so moving.
They walk up to each other. They get like, oh my god, it's you, and then they just go back to the real world, and then that's it. Like,
oh wow,
it's so unmoving. I don't feel anything for it. Like, and because most of the movie is spent with Scott like, oh, I gotta do my FBI thing. If anything, this movie is one of the only MCU movies, not one of the only, but one of the major examples of an MCU movie that is disadvantaged by having to be part of the MCU. Like, having to follow on from that Captain America storyline, like the Civil War one, completely fucked over this movie, because now Scott is busy trying to like juggle that, and we can't just focus on we can't just focus on Hope and Hank. like if the movie was just about them with Scott as a supporting character, I think I would like it a lot more. And then you have Goliath in there, and he sort of represents like something haunting Hank. But as it is, I feel like no one's really in the movie enough except for Scott, and Scott has the least to do. Like, but I mean, I don't know. That's just me.
Well, we'll get to it later on. I completely disagree.
I'm glad
but that's okay.
you've joined me in the sun with Thor Ragnarok.
I do. Which I think we both need to touch on why that's so low.
Yes, because everyone loves that one.
Yeah, everyone loves it. And I'll tell you what, on a first watch, it's enjoyable. It's fun. It's like watching a Saturday morning cartoon, but that's about it. You dig maybe like an inch below the surface and there is nothing. The film constantly contradicts itself in terms of what it's trying to say. It has no real message at all.
And
They pull that exactly. They pull that whole Asgard is a place, not or Asgard is a people, not a place, out of their ass at the last minute in a very well done way. Like, this is what I'll say about this film. Taika Waititi is a magician because he, maybe not to us, but for most people, he makes you believe that there is an actual message to this film.
And the Ragnarok, yeah, I know. Legitimately,
absolutely.
The number of people I've seen praise, like, oh, Taika Waititi fixed Thor, and it's like, I mean, he made Thor more fun, and I guess that was enough, because, I mean, maybe that's what people's major problem with Thor was up until now, was like,
it was never, fun. But that was never the problem with him. It was just the films.
Yeah, it was just the films, and like, I think, like, and we'll get to this when we talk about Endgame, but I think Endgame found a nice balance. I mean, people fucking hate the way they handled Thor in Endgame, but I think Infinity War and Endgame really found a nice way to handle Thor. But because he has some of the, like, the fun manic energy from Ragnarok. Because like, that's the thing, you're right, Thor is fun, and I think I'm excited now that post Endgame, Thor is no longer burdened with any of the Asgard stuff, and he can just go have space adventures. Because now I think Taika Waititi's next Thor movie is going to be great, because it'll be unshackled. He can just do all the Sakaar stuff, but like have that be the focus of the movie. Because like you were saying, like basically this movie is Thor's dad dies, his evil sister comes back, tries to revive an old like sort of way of thinking in Asgard about like them being conquerors, and then Thor goes and has a random side quest on an alien planet, and it is fun. But
he learns nothing, by the way.
And then he comes back and he's confronted by his sisters like, hey, our dad was actually a butcher, and yeah, he may have changed his mind about that, but I'm going to bring it back. And then Thor just goes, okay, well, you're the bad guy, so I'm going to fight you now. And then he has a vision where his dad explains the entire fucking message of the movie, and then he went to Sakaar, and like it would make sense if like while he was in Sakaar he learned that like, being a good leader is important, because look at what like Jeff Goldblum, look what he's doing here. What's his name? The Grand Master. He's a terrible leader. Yeah. He enslaves all his people. The people are more important. Like we're on a junk planet, but the people are what make this place special, not the place. There's your message. Like he could learn literally anything, or he could interact with Valkyrie, and maybe her pessimism about Asgard can sort of cause him to reflect on the power structures that be, and that's what causes him to sort of change his thinking. Literally anything, but nothing happens of value when Sakaar executes.
And it struggles with whether to make him like a mentor who has to teach all of these people different lessons and kind of like position him to be that leader of Asgard, or whether he is the person who has to learn all of these things.
Yeah.
And so it just like I said, it's a film that constantly contradicts itself. It kind of poses interesting things. Like you were talking about the whole colonialism thing.
Yeah.
Where like Asgard having to account for the sins of their past, and when that threat comes back to them, how do they respond to that, and how does Thor respond to that? But it's half baked. It feels just thrown in there at the last second.
I mean, I think if I hear one complaint about the movie, it's that everyone's like, oh, the Hela stuff is undercooked, and it's like, yeah, but the solution isn't just to cut the Hela stuff out. The solution is it should be better integrated with everything else that's going on in the movie, you know? Like, like it was so lame that Hela comes and takes over Asgard, and she just like storms the castle and after what she has one big battle, and then she storms the castle and then locks the door, and then that's it. Like she's now the ruler of Asgard. Like she has one follower, which is Scourge, and that's it.
Who's probably like one of the few characters who actually has a legitimate arc in this film.
Like Scourge and Loki are the only two characters with an arc in the movie.
I would say Valkyrie too. Valkyrie
does too. Yeah, Valkyrie does too. She just sort of inexplicably changed her mind, but at least it's a character who grew. Yeah, I don't know. Like Thor,
which
is just once again the least interesting character in his movie.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. But going back to Valkyrie, what a perfect opportunity to kind of double back on the colonialism thing, because she was one of the conquerors for the longest time.
Yeah.
And the stuff with Hela happened, and she went into hiding because she felt that she had failed. And now this threat is emerging with Hela again, trying to bring back those old ways after Valkyrie is aware that those old ways need to be put to rest. And so it's like her stepping back into the line of fire, going back to her duty to prevent that from happening again, is a powerful character arc. It's too bad the rest of the film doesn't kind of double down on that ideology that you see in her.
Absolutely. I mean, you could literally make a case that she does not like Asgard, right? Because, I mean, in the movie, she doesn't like Asgard. She's like, well, that's all a bunch of tosh, right? But you could make a point that she comes back because she doesn't like Asgard, but she likes her people, and she's going to defend her people from a bad ideology. You could literally, it's like that's the point of the movie, but the movie never really makes that point.
No.
It just sort of says she's coming back now because she was recruited by Thor and she has a change of heart. Like, it's never really, I don't know, it feels really underwhelming. That could tie into Thor's reason for going back and all this sort of thing. Like, it just, there's so many opportunities. The movie is on the verge of being very good, and it just misses the mark in such a big way that when, like, on rewatch, I'm just like, why do I care about this story at all? Yeah,
I don't care about anything.
Fun,
yeah,
and like there's some fun banter, but yeah, I mean, like Hela is basically leading a make Asgard great again kind of movement, and it would be interesting if like maybe some of the people in Asgard agreed with her and they're like, yeah, I'm kind of sick of Asgard being pacifist, especially since Loki took over and he was running the, like, they established at the beginning of the movie that Loki was doing a bad job being a ruler, and you could literally have like that be like a thing was that when Thor comes back, he has to inspire his people again because they've lost faith and they've started to fall in line with Hela. And I mean, but no, you can't have that because everyone has to be virtuous and Thor has to come back.
Well, that's the thing. And that's the other thing is that this movie, anytime it lets you in to try and let you feel something, it takes it away with a cheap joke. Like when Asgard is literally blowing up and these people are watching their home that they've lived on for decades, eons, blow up. Korg makes a joke. And I'm like, listen, I get characters who are there for comedic relief, and a lot of people like Korg. I fucking hate Korg. For that reason, for reasons like that, he disrupts things by throwing in a joke. And Korg is very much much Taika Waititi. I mean, that's his kind of sense of humor, and that's great, but just contain it, let the emotional moments play out. Let that be a impactful moment, and don't ruin it with a cheap joke. And this film does that a lot. This film does that a lot.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's like, I mean, I know a lot of people complain about like the humor, and that is a problem. Like Marvel sometimes will overplay its joke, but like nowhere is that more evident than in Ragnarok. I think that's of all the movies, I think that's really the only one that is severely hampered by the fact that it constantly tries to divert your attention away from actual, like, genuine emotion. And it's like it's afraid of being sincere. And I find something very cynical about that.
Yeah,
like, it's there's no sincere moments in the film except for maybe Scourge, like, turning. Like, that's really maybe the only sincere moment in the film. Everything else is just played for a joke, and that's fine. I don't know. It just, like, if the movie shouldn't tease you with, like, oh, here's genuine emotion. Nah. Like, if you're just going to play it for jokes, don't tease me with actual, like, stakes, But, I don't know. This movie is just, the more I watch it, the more I just like I got frustrated with it.
Yeah,
and
I really do too.
There are
And
parts but like I don't know.
Yeah, like and I will say there are great moments. That opening is incredible where he's fighting Surtur.
Yeah.
It's great. And weirdly enough, they use Immigrant Song and they bring it back again for when Thor finally gets his lightning powers, which is also kind of doubling down on that colonialism thing, but if only that moment, meant something more than just being a cool action beat, which I get it's saying the power is within you all along.
Which his dad has to tell him because he never learns
Yeah, it's like his dad has to tell him that he doesn't figure it out for himself. And it means it's not something that was really touched on a whole lot in the film.
He was never questioning it throughout the movie. Maybe like after Hela defeats him, he could be like, "Oh dang, I'm not as powerful as I thought I was." Like he never really thinks that. He basically beats the Hulk. Like it's just, it was never a question, and so the movie answers it. And it's just like, "Oh, we were supposed to be thinking that." Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's that's a struggle. And the last thing I'll say on this is it was we had heard stories that a lot of this movie was improvised, and it shows because it's kind of going all over the place. I think that I really do think there are some tonal inconsistencies with it, and it's not necessarily balanced as well as it should be. It's fun. It's just fluff. It's cool Saturday morning cartoon entertainment, but that's the extent.
Yeah.
And I think that's ultimately why it falls so low on both of our lists, is just because of what they were ultimately trying to do but did not do.
Yeah, and it might sound like I really don't like this movie, but the reason it is like a 19 and not at 22 is that it has some fun moments, and also I think it did, flaws and all, set the stage nicely for the Russo brothers and I forget the writers' names, but for them to come
Marcus
in,
and McFeely.
Yes, it set the stage for them to come in Infinity War and really build off of that and create something that I genuinely love now. The new Thor, especially in Infinity War, but also in Endgame. I love him, and I can't wait to see more from him, and I can't wait to see what Taika Waititi does with him. But yeah, just this one, it's a rough go.
It is. All right. Now, are there any other films that we need to discuss in our 22 through 16?
I mean, like I Captain Marvel, I'm fine on. It's meh.
I mean, just to kind of like give it its time in the sun. I think that there's some stuff that's good in it. I think Ben Mendelsohn is excellent. Talos is one of the best and most interesting characters we've gotten in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But that first act is borderline horrible. Carol as a character has her moments of spunk, and she has her moments where she's interesting. But I think Brie Larson is terribly miscast. And the ultimate like issue with the movie is it has no direction. The direction is so bland that I don't know what the filmmakers were really doing with it. And the cat, what the fuck is the cat's name?
I
Goose.
The cat's name too.
Goose.
That's it,
A Goose was so frustrating. That whole how Sam Jackson lost, and I hated that.
See, I liked. The stuff I like, I think for me, I like Brie Larson as Captain Marvel. I think the only problem with Carol in the movie, and I don't have I think I liked her journey of like sort of how she constantly sort of gaslit her entire life, and then having to stand up to Yon-Rogg, and having to. I love that last moment where she sort of does the Raiders of the Lost Ark thing and shoots him down. Like sort of speech. You have to prove it to me, and like. Yeah, it's good because like her whole journey in the movie was that she just constantly felt like she had to prove herself to people, and then this is sort of no, I don't have to prove myself to you, and that was great.
I didn't necessarily get. I didn't think that came across well.
Oh, you don't? I
don't think it did at all. It was just. I never felt like she believed in herself. You know.
Well, I think Carol.
Yeah.
Well, that's the point. I think the point is that she constantly let people like put her down to the point where she didn't believe in herself, and then finally at the end she sort of learns I don't have to prove myself to you to prove my worth. Right.
And I get that, but I never saw that turn in her. I never
really?
It never really registered for me.
I think that worked. I think the problem though with Carol's journey was that. I mean, that first, you're right. The first act is terrible. Once she gets to Earth, I actually really enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that is where it gets better.
And
sure.
I think like I love the twist with the Kree. I thought that was brilliant, and I think that
You mean the Skrulls?
Yeah, that's like the Skrulls. That's
Yeah.
I love the twist with the Skrulls. I don't
Same.
like the twist with the Kree, and that's my thing. Is because another one like a little bit like Ant-Man and the Wasp for me, where like we know the Kree are bad. Like we've known that since Guardians of the Galaxy. The Kree are not good people. Or at the very least, they're like a little dubious. And so when Carol's going around saying, "Oh, they're warriors," in the back of my mind, the entire movie, I'm sort of like, they're not good people. You could see it coming, and so it kind of made Carol feel a little less proactive because she couldn't see it coming. So that when it is revealed, it's sort of like, why did you even bother keeping this from her? Or not even from her, but why'd you bother keeping this from us as the audience? Because we saw Guardians of the Galaxy. But so I think like her having to then face the Kree felt a little less climactic because it was sort of, we were thinking about the whole time and we didn't feel as shocked as Carol did. So yeah, I don't know. That for me is kind of what weighs it down a little bit, and that's what makes it feel a little directionless, is because the movie is sort of treading water, waiting to reveal this big Kree thing, and we already know. And so
I also think I completely agree with that. I also think that the structure of the film is really weird. I would have liked to have gotten more of her backstory. They showed like the flashbacks, but like it wasn't really enough to get a sense of who she was. I thought I would have liked had that been at the very beginning of the film, and then that kind of works into her journey, because it's basically doing the Man of Steel thing where it's telling her origin through flashbacks, but they didn't give those flashbacks enough time to breathe or really expand upon who she is, and so I didn't think it worked as well.
I think that stuff worked for me. I think just my major problem was that like I don't know. I think it was definitely not super strong, and it probably needed more emphasis on the flashbacks. I don't know. I think there was some subtle stuff with her that I think I liked her as a character. I know like some people don't, but
I'll tell you what,
she was good in this. Like
and it's weird because she shot this film before Captain Marvel, so I think this really goes back to the real problem of Captain Marvel being the directors. I thought she was better in Endgame than she was in Captain Marvel for the limited screen.
From her in Endgame.
I mean, I didn't get much, but I kind of liked her more in that movie. Like I can't really explain why. It was just that.
I think I liked her more in Captain Marvel, but like
Did you? Interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
but I mean, only because she didn't really have much to do in Endgame. She had some cool moments, but I mean, like, I didn't dislike her in Endgame either. But
no, I mean, that's fair.
And also like, going back to the Sam Jack thing, I kind of liked that he lost his eye for some trivial reason, because I think for me, that kind of, like, you have that moment in Winter Soldier where he's like, last time I trusted someone, I lost an eye, and the fact that he's kind of making that up kind of tells me more about Nick Fury than I think I've ever learned about Nick Fury, which is that he's a little vain. He doesn't really he lost his eye in a really embarrassing way, and so he's just basically making up a reason to like sort of make himself sound cooler, which for me, I don't know, that made me more endeared to him as a character. And he's always been a bit of a cipher character. He's never really had much of a personality beyond Samuel L. Jackson playing him. And that little moment for me was like, oh yeah, I kind of get a little bit more about who Nick Fury is now. So for me, I didn't actually mind that, but
yeah, that's fair. I know people use that as the defense for that moment. To me, it was just, I just thought it was the dumbest thing. But anyways, moving away from Captain Marvel, before we move on to the next segment, any other films you want to talk about? Do you want to repeat yours, me repeat mine?
Let's just repeat them. But
okay.
So yeah, I guess I have Incredible Hulk. I just don't care about that movie. It didn't make me feel anything. Ant-Man and the Wasp. We talked about that one. Thor: The Dark World. I like a little bit more than last time because of Endgame. Just kind of, and also I rewatched it, and I think some of the stuff, once it gets going, it gets good. But all the Earth stuff is garbage. Thor: Ragnarok we talked about. Captain Marvel we talked about, and then Doctor Strange is just kind of boring and awful.
Doctor Strange,
and like unpleasant to watch. I don't know. And then Iron Man 2, I think I've grown on a little bit more just because it's fun. I think it's a
Yeah.
fun movie that is very messy and overly reliant on the MCU as a big meta narrative, but like
I've never been in the camp that hated Iron Man 2.
I used to hate it a lot. That's actually one of the ones I rewatched before Endgame, and I was like, I am carried through by Tony's daddy issues and Justin Hammer and like just some of the more fun stuff going on.
Right.
But I don't mind that the whole story is basically Avengers setup.
Right, and I'll say this: I don't think it's. I think when people say it's just all Avengers setup, I think it's a pretty extreme exaggeration. I don't think.
About that. I think it is. I think the whole movie. There's a whole subplot about Shield that just kind of doesn't really serve
there's
Tony's story.
that subplot, but I don't think it's that. I mean, it's intrusive, obviously, and it's kind of like, yeah, this is basically setup moving, but I don't think it's as bad as people say it is. I don't know. I like you. I have a lot of fun with Iron Man 2. I think the showdown at the end with the Hammer drones is great with Brody and Tony. And then the Justin Hammer stuff, Tony's daddy stuff. That's all really well done. And overall, it's just it's fun to rewatch. So.
Yeah,
I mean,
your 22 through 16 last time.
Yeah, so 22, Thor: The Dark World, obvious reasons. 21, Captain Marvel, just really didn't do anything for me, and it's probably not one. It's not memorable to me at all. Kind of similar to Thor: The Dark World, so that's also another contributing factor why it's down there. But we talked about that. Iron Man 2, yeah, it's a setup movie. I think they wasted, Tony's alcohol addiction, that plot line on this film. And just because originally that's what they wanted to do with it, and showing all of his other.
Although I will
vice
say,
problems.
like on rewatching it, I think Iron Man 2 is actually a little bit improved by Iron Man 3 and the rest of the MCU by virtue of the fact that Iron Man 2 kind of hints at the idea that his Iron Man suit being the thing that poisons him is his addiction.
Yeah, that's true, especially during the party scene, yeah.
Yeah, and as you keep going, you sort of realize that, the Iron Man stuff is his addiction. This constant need to improve and to be and so to upgrade. And so, I think Iron Man 2 is actually a little bit helped by Iron Man 3 and the rest of them. But yeah,
shit. You know what? Shit, I might swap around Iron Man 2 on my list now. We'll see. At the very least, it'll move over what my number 19 is, which is Doctor Strange. First time I saw it, loved it. I think the visuals are spectacular, and I do enjoy the side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe that it opened. But unfortunately, actually, I'll say Benedict Cumberbatch is good. I think he's much better in other films, but in this one, it just kind of like rushes through all the setup. He just becomes Doctor Strange, and he just does a bunch of stuff, and as a result, we were talking about this before we started recording. This film feels so abbreviated. It just feels like it just kind of happened, and it's like, well, there's Doctor Strange, and I'm just like, okay.
In the same way, there's like, oh, here's Dormammu.
I like how he defeated Dormammu. I thought that was really creative, but at the same time, they just kind of shoehorned
Dormammu
in there at the last second. I was just kind of like, eh. So it's a movie that and you want to. And you want to talk about like misplaced humor in Thor Ragnarok. Oh my God, Doctor Strange might be right up there with some horribly misplaced humor. The Beyonce joke, that wasn't even funny, and it just goes on for.
It was just kind of, it was kind of one of those things where they Doctor Strange, Stephen Strange is kind of like Tony Stark. Let's give him. But
at the same time, he's not.
He's not.
He's not.
I mean, but that also is like. He's just a much, much more annoying version of Tony Stark in this.
Yeah.
And instead of tech, he's got his magic that he's inexplicably just he rushed through his fucking origin, and then he's not really ever challenged by anyone except for the Ancient One. And I like that conversation. I think it's a really when she dies. I think that's great. Yep. And then it's undercut by the fucking cape.
Oh God!
I'm really glad they've started to undersell the fact that the cape has a personality.
Yeah, I'm really happy about that. It was
some magic carpet bullshit.
Oh yeah, for sure. Anyways, but number 19 for me is Doctor Strange. Number 18, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. We'll get to that when it's up on your list. 17, The Incredible Hulk. I think it's a fun monster showdown film. I get why people don't like it. I kind of dug Ed Norton in the role. Obviously, Mark Ruffalo I like a little bit better, but I have fun with that one. I don't mind it that much. And then number 16 is Thor Ragnarok. So, any final words, or do you want to move on?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty. I mean, like the Incredible Hulk you mentioned, I almost don't even count it as an MCU movie.
I get that.
Like,
yeah.
It's just so bland, and then it's also just so inconsequential. Like they set up the leader, they set up like Betty Ross, and all. The only thing that comes back is General Ross, but
yeah.
And even that, they don't seem to have any relationship with each other because General Ross never mentions the fact that, oh, hey, I hated you and you destroyed Harlem. But
yeah, that's so weird. But anyways, okay, moving on to 16 through 11, or I'm sorry, 15 through 11.
Yeah.
Brody, what do you got?
Okay, yeah, this will be interesting. But 15 through 11 is Thor, the first Thor.
That's my 15 as well.
Oh, hell yeah.
That is, yeah, absolutely.
Then my 14, I don't think this will be your 14. I think it's going to be a bit higher, even though it has moved down, is Captain America Civil War. And then 13 is Ant-Man, which is way up from where it used to be.
It is. It is. Still too low,
like
but
right
that's
in the
okay.
middle of my list, I think. And then I have 12 is Age of Ultron, and 11 is Spider-Man Homecoming.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we've got some overlap in there. For me, 15, obviously Thor. 14, I have Black Panther. That's going to be a big one for people that are just like, what the fuck? 13, Age of Ultron, which actually got a massive bump after rewatching it recently. 12, Guardians of the Galaxy, and 11, Iron Man.
Interesting. Very nice.
Yeah, very interesting thing there. What do you want to talk about first?
We can save Civil War because that's going to be later on your list.
Which I think we share a lot of the same opinions on that film now, or more so than we used to. But I think it's just, I mean, I think we do share some of the similar. Thor, the first Thor movie, is the best Thor movie. It is. It's such a delight
because Thor actually has to like grow and change as a human being, and the Loki stuff is like. I mean, I think because Loki's not really in the Avengers a ton. He has some cool scenes, but he's not really a focal point. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of what informs people's love of Loki comes from that first Thor movie. Like, really? I think he's. I mean, you don't think so? I mean, no,
I don't, because I think Loki's good in that first Thor, but he's nowhere near as charismatic as he is in Avengers.
Oh no, absolutely, he is definitely more charismatic and more confident in that first movie. But I think like the idea that like Thor, that in Thor he is this reluctant villain, this tortured, needy, tragic kind of character. I loved that, and I think that's why I like him. Because like going into Avengers, then you can have him be the confident, arrogant kind of character, but you have all this these extra layers to him, right? So that when you see him being cocky and overly aggressive, you're like, you know where that comes from. And I don't think he would work as well in Avengers if it weren't for the first Thor movie. And I just think his relationship with Thor is so great there. I think in Ragnarok it's actually pretty good, and in The Dark World it's pretty good. I think their relationship is probably one of the most consistent things in the Thor movies. But yeah, Thor is the good. Jane isn't boring in this one.
No.
I like Dr. Selvig. I even like Darcy a little bit. Like
she's not as insufferable as she is in The Dark World.
I think just like this is a general. There's a style to it because Kenneth Branagh is really.
Which that was actually what I was about to say. I think that Kenneth Branagh brings such a striking visual flair to this film. And I know people are always commenting on the Dutch angles, and like his reason was like, oh, it's like you turning the pages of a comic book kind of thing. I think
was that his reason? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, it's like something like that. I listen, I could be wrong, but that's what I read. So I didn't mind it. I actually found it to be quite effective.
Yeah.
And it was unique. I had never really seen something like that before.
And it kind of makes you feel unsettled when you're watching. Like when you're watching all the stuff on Earth, there's this kind of like foreboding, like something isn't right.
Right.
Like the world is kind of askew. And yeah, no, I didn't mind it either.
No, I didn't. But I think there's a gravitas to it. Obviously, all the stuff on Asgard is very much up Branagh's alley, being such a Shakespearean actor, and in the projects that he tackles, that whole thing really worked. His establishing and like kind of creating the world of Asgard, I thought was very well done. I just wish they had spent more time on Asgard, because that's obviously the most interesting part. But the stuff on Earth, it's not bad. And like you said, Thor actually learned something there, something pretty substantial, and all around, I think it's a fun movie. I think it's a little kind of similar to Doctor Strange. It feels a little short, but in a different way. Whereas like Doctor Strange kind of like rushes through everything. Thor doesn't necessarily rush through anything. It just feels short, you know?
Yeah, it kind of has just like less going on, because you sort of you have that middle stuff. You have all the fish out of water stuff, and then it just sort of is waiting for the climax with Loki. So
yeah,
it's kind of like anticipation. But it worked for me. I think all that stuff is really. It also set the groundwork for where Thor would go, because you sort of start off with Thor, and he's a bit of a brat, but he's like an Asgardian brat, and then he kind of introduces him to Earth, and that's kind of where they end up going with the character. He becomes more human, so to speak, as the series goes on.
I agree.
So I think that was kind of the groundwork for that. I don't know. Yeah, it's a fun time. I would go back and rewatch it. And I think they use Coulson the right amount as well. I think they just use all of the supporting characters really well on that one.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. The other one, I think, the other commonality we had, I think, was Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
Which, listen, I have been the biggest. I have always like poo-pooed on Age of Ultron ever since I first saw it. Because it was a colossal disappointment, and it's still in a lot of ways is a disappointment. There's still things I don't like about it, like the Thor hot tub thing is a big WTF. That was just like, come on, guys. But what I love about it is it actually felt like these characters were people. Like kind of expanding upon what we got in the first Avengers film, I felt the relationships between all these characters were strengthened, and you really got a sense of the team and their bond together. Everyone always points out the party scene, and I have to agree. I think that's a great sequence that really showcases who these characters are as people. And on top of that, I think that Tony's whole MO throughout this whole film, him feeling guilty and whatnot, is, it bothers me on one hand because it feels like he turned a new leaf in Iron Man 3, but he kind of does this because Scarlet Witch gets in his head, and of course, just kind of subconsciously, his greatest fear is going to be, not protecting people or having to fix something. He's the mechanic and whatnot. And so it makes sense, and so seeing where the divide kind of starts to form between the Avengers, between like Cap and Thor, and a bunch of people saying like, why did you do this? Like you just created like something horrible and that didn't need to be done. You abused this power. And then Tony saying like, do you not see the problem? Like we need to put a suit of armor around the world, which there's a great callback in Endgame to that. Actually, Endgame makes me like this movie a lot more than I did.
Even more, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think this movie kind of felt like the odd one out in terms of the Avengers movies for a while.
Yeah.
Because you have this Ultron thing. And obviously there was the connection that like this is this is connected to the Infinity Stone stuff because of Vision and because of how they get the idea for Ultron and all that. But like I don't know, I think if you use the through line being Tony Stark, it fits perfectly because you have in Iron Man 3, which we'll talk about in a bit, Tony sort of he's back on the right track. He's dealing with his issues. He isn't like cured, but he's dealing with them. And then you get to Age of Ultron, and it sort of becomes Tony's downward spiral because he loses like his cool essentially and goes for this Ultron thing, partially because he's trying to rely less on his armor after Iron Man 3. And that completely backfires. And then, because then you have the Sokovia thing, and then he becomes even more guilty. And because you don't ever really lose your PTSD. You sort of just learn to deal with it. He sort of stops dealing with it, and he starts becoming even more driven by it. And then,
or he deals with it in the wrong way.
Yeah, and then it eventually leads to the Civil War, where you get like this actually becomes a conflict and tears the Avengers apart, and then you get to Infinity War and Endgame, where it becomes like the focus of the film. And so, Yeah, I think Age of Ultron is it's a messy film, but it is a very, it's a film with big ideas and with an actual artist behind it trying to make those big ideas come to pass.
And that's the thing. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the thing. This film stylistically is one of the most striking films in the MCU. I think Joss Whedon, for all the shit he gets for what he did with Justice League, for all the shit he gets for, this film even, I think the visual palette of this movie is incredible. There are so many great heroic splash page moments, similar to what we got in the first Avengers movie, but in this one, they're like that circling around when they're fighting all the Ultron bots is great. The like Vision, Tony, and Thor like beaming on Ultron. There's some Vista shots. The one of them at the very beginning, like raiding the Hydra base, and like the slow, fast-mo kind of shot there. And the other thing is the way he shot the action in this film felt ground level. In a weird way, this movie... Tonally, it doesn't fit the style, which kind of bugs me, but like visually, this movie does feel very dark, very serious, and especially during the end battle, we get a sense of that. And the other thing that I love about Joss's approach to the Avengers film, and especially in this one, we get a sense of the world. We get a sense of the real stakes involved in the people and how it's affecting them. I mean, you see at the very beginning when Tony Stark's sentries kind of come in and these people are not having it and they're throwing stuff at, they're protesting. We clearly see that there is some civil unrest with the Avengers.
Actually impact the world that they're in. Yeah,
exactly. And he does all this without hammering it, down. It's very subtly done, and so he has to be commended on that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, I mean, the later Avengers movies, which obviously we both like more because they are higher, but in this one, it's interesting because you get, Joss is so good at giving every character something of substance to do. I love Infinity War, but there is, and even there are elements of this in Endgame as well, where every character has a subplot and every character has something going on, but not all of them really have constantly moving pieces, if that makes any sense. Whereas in this one, you've got Scarlet Witch is probably the most interesting she's ever been in Age of Ultron.
Oh yeah, she's
and then
great.
You've got her relationship with Hawkeye, but then you've also got Hawkeye's relationship with his family and how that sort of causes a strain with his avenging stuff.
Hawkeye is incredible in this movie, and that moment or that sequence, the time that Joss took to go to that farm to flesh out Hawkeye and show that he actually has something that he needs to protect, and then also see how the other Avengers kind of respond to that. So some of my favorite lines are at that farm, especially with Hawkeye talking to his wife, and she's like, or he's saying, I'm just a guy with a bow and arrow, and then she says, and that's why they need you. You're like the human element to this team, because everyone else is affected by something greater than them. I mean, even Scarlet Witch, who is an assassin, has kind of lost her humanity due to her time at the Russian, I'm going to assume it was KGB Academy, and we get little glimpses of that, which I thought were great. And she considers herself a monster because of the things, the atrocities she committed. And so Barton,
I think sometimes that gets misattributed. They think, I've heard people say that she thinks she's a monster because she's infertile. I don't think that's the reason she thinks she's a monster. I think she's a monster because she kills people for a living.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's the same, and it's why Bruce and Natasha are kind of drawn to each other, because they have, even though they're very different, they are shared circumstances. And so
she uses that infertility thing more as he says he can't have kids, and then she's like, well, I can't have kids either, so
it's we're fine. Right, they can be fine. Yeah. But anyways,
I got misconstrued a little bit. But.
Yeah. So Barton in turn is really the truly human element on that team, and that's why he is so important. And in Endgame, when we see him lose that element, it's really interesting.
Yeah, and then having everyone almost bring him back is kind of a nice full circle thing. But we'll get to that when we get to Endgame. But
for sure,
yeah. And I mean, but not even just that. Every relationship, every character kind of has. It's not just I feel like sometimes in movies, and this is like kind of a credit to this is a staple of all of Joss's like work. But like I feel like sometimes in movies you kind of just have, well, this movie's going to focus on these two characters and these two characters and these two characters, and like you sort of just pair everyone off, or you sort of, you know what I mean? And in this one, it kind of just felt, and in the first one as well, you kind of just get this feeling that, like, yeah, you could have just made it about Hawkeye and Scarlet Witch, but Hawkeye kind of has a relationship with everyone, and it kind of develops as the movie goes on. Yeah. Just like Cap and Tony. That's probably the most important relationship, but Tony has a dynamic with Banner, and he has a dynamic with what's her name, Maria Hill, and like it's just I don't know, it just kind of feels like a real ensemble. And
yeah, it does. Probably, and I'd even say more so than the original Avengers. The original Avengers is an ensemble piece, but because of how much deeper this one is able to go, because it doesn't have to set up the team, it really feels more so like an ensemble piece,
Yeah, and I mean, like I know another big issue people have is Ultron himself, but
yeah, he still doesn't work for me.
I honestly don't like this last viewing. I mean, yeah, he's a little too quippy sometimes, but I kind of get this idea. I mean, like, not this idea because it makes it sound like I made this up, and this is very much the intention. He is very much like a child, and I kind of liked the idea that the Avengers have to sort of go up against like basically a child maniacal version of Tony Stark, and he kind of gradually, as things don't go his way, he gradually just becomes more and more unhinged, and I think James Spader plays unhinged really well. So you kind of, he's not like the big menacing I'm Ultron like kind of thing like most AI tends to be. I think I sort of more and more as time goes on get what Joss was going for. He's just kind of a complete wild card, and that's what makes him scary, is that you don't really know what he's going to do, because he likes to think he's thinking through everything rationally, but he's the most irrational character in a lot like Tony Stark in the movie, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I kind of like the God complex element they gave him too.
Yeah, and it kind of foreshadows where you end up getting with Thanos, because he's a similar kind of character where he has a God complex and he thinks he's the only one who can fix the problem, a lot like Tony Stark. And that mentality kind of causes him to sort of lose sight of what he's actually trying to do. So like, he's trying to, at first he starts off saying like humans, like, you're your own worst enemy, and then he just sort of like Thanos gets to a point where he's like, well, I have to kill humans, and he misses the point of what makes humans special. And that's why that last speech with Vision is such a powerful,
oh my god,
that's one of my favorite scenes in the MCU.
That. Same,
it's a beautiful moment. And it really encapsulates the like you said, like it's a very big, grandiose moment, but it captures the heart of the Avengers, that they are about the little people. They're they don't think they're better than anyone, and that's what makes them. And then really, they're not better than anyone, and that's what makes them special. Yeah, I don't know. It's a messy movie. It does have its issues. Like, the Thor stuff is a bit.
Thor stuff. The humor. I think they overdo the humor a lot in this movie. That always bugged me.
And I think. But other than that, honestly, it's one I've really grown to appreciate. So
out of all the films on this list, this one in particular is a film that even on more rewatches could move its way up the list, just because I feel like it. Yeah. The good starts to really just like move to the top in that film, because the good stuff is really, really good. And that mixed with Joss's just like natural visual aesthetic is great. And so absolutely. But anyways, we talked about Age of Ultron a little bit enough. I have Black Panther at 14. Do you want to talk about that now or when you bring it up?
I've got it a little bit higher, so we can just talk about that, because I will talk about Civil War as well when we get to that on yours.
Yeah. Oh, there is one thing I want to talk about in regards to Civil War. It ties back to Age of Ultron, so maybe I'll bring it up now. Or you know what? No, I'll wait for Civil War and we'll bring it up there. But yeah, no, I have Guardians at 12 and Iron Man at 11. I know you have those higher. Do you want to talk about them now, or you want to wait?
I mean, they're pretty much like the next couple ones on my list, but and I have Spider-Man at 11 instead.
Oh, you have Spider-Man at 11? I have Spider-Man a little bit higher too.
Yeah, we can just talk about those next
when we get there. Okay, so just to recap, no, we spent a lot of time on Age of Ultron there. Brody, what's your 15 through 11 one more time?
15 through 11. 15 is Thor. 14 is Captain America Civil War, 13 is Ant-Man, 12 is Age of Ultron, 11 is Spider-Man Homecoming.
Yes, and some of those on there, like Civil War and Ant-Man, we'll get to later. For me, 15 is Thor, 14 is Black Panther, 13 Age of Ultron, 12 Guardians of the Galaxy, and 11 Iron Man. All right, we're in the top 10 now. We're in the end game now. So the way, just to kind of give you guys a refresher, because I know it's been a little bit since we started the episode, the way the top 10 works, Brody's going to give his bottom 3. I'm going to give my bottom 3. And basically, when he says his 10, we'll talk about that a little bit. When he says his 9, we'll talk about that a little bit. And then after we've done our bottom 3, we'll move on to the next 3. And then after that, we'll just trade one apiece. So, all right, Brody, what is your number 10?
Kind of fitting, it's Iron Man.
Okay, all right. So it was literally just one place above.
Just the next one above. Yep.
Yes. Okay.
Iron Man
cool.
is one of those. It's a brilliant movie. It definitely deserves to be in the top 10. It sets up so much that ends up being so important for the rest of the universe, and it starts this universe. So I mean, its significance in terms of that is can't be understated. But as a movie, I just think it holds up really well. It feels completely different to everything else that comes after.
It's kind of hard to believe that this is the film that started the MCU. You know what I'm saying? It feels so detached.
Yeah, and I think it I don't know. It has such a strong core, like core, arc reactor. But Tony Stark has been and always will be, I think, my favorite character in the MCU, and it's because Iron Man sets such a strong. I mean, Captain America is real close behind, but like. Iron Man is just such a strong film, and it's because of what they did with him, what they did with, like, Robert Downey Jr. did with the character, and his relationships with everyone. His relationship with Pepper is probably the best out of all the films in this first film. It really, the reason you keep caring about their relationship 10 years on is because this first movie established it so well.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I mean, like, I couldn't put it any higher because there are other ones that I like a bit more, but I don't know. There's something very special about it. It's just so well constructed.
No, I agree.
Surprising that so much of it, like in contrast to Ragnarok, so much of this film is improvised, and yet it never really loses track of the arcs that it is establishing and what the movie is about. It never really loses track of that. And I think it's maybe because the movie isn't improvised for comedy. It's just improvised to sort of keep that loose, organic kind of feel that Jon Favreau likes to, a lot of his older films like sort of strived for. So,
no, I completely agree, and it killed me really not to put it in the top 10. I think the thing is just I as much as I adore and I love this film, I don't go back and rewatch it as much as some of the others on this list. Yeah. But ultimately, I mean that first Iron Man movie is super special for many different reasons. I think the establishment. Or the establishing of Tony Stark is incredibly well done. He just instantly pops off the screen. And it's not necessarily because there was anything written on the page. It was just what Robert Downey Jr. brought to the character. I mean, you talk about the improvisation on set. It really it benefits the film because Robert Downey Jr. is just able to kind of like do whatever he wants, not like go balls off the wall crazy, but craft a character. He himself, like Robert Downey Jr., crafted that character. He forged it, if you will, kind of like he forged the armor.
At the helm in Jon Favreau, who is willing to let an actor go there, but also keeping story and theme and characterization in mind the entire time. So it's not like directionless improv. It's sort of like, you can improv here, but I'm going to make sure it sticks to like the overall arc of the story.
Right.
Because you don't want it to feel disjointed, right?
Yeah. And I think there's something really interesting about the fact that this movie feels so rooted in the world of 2008, Like probably more so than any of the other films on this list. This movie genuinely feels like it it could take place in our world, and how they touch on Tony Stark being this warmonger. Well, not necessarily a warmonger, but a war profiteer, and how that vision is changed through like the experiences that he has in Afghanistan, his relationship with Jensen, which I think is beautiful. I love their whole encounters and Tony Stark actually building the suit. Yeah, I mean, everything that happens in that Afghan cave is so crucial to everything that character becomes.
And it kind of perfectly. I mean, this is baked into the origin story from the comics, obviously, but they really. I don't know if the comics ever really took advantage of this as much as the MCU has, in the fact that Iron Man is a character a lot like Batman, but for different reasons, who is driven by like regret and kind of this like fear almost. Like, I mean, even because you sort of, once you get to Iron Man 3 and the Avengers and all that, it sort of takes off, and then Age of Ultron, we talked about this before, how he is constantly driven by his own failure and by, sort of this dread of what is to come, and his need to stop it, this obsession. And I think even in this first movie, though, you start right off the bat with this, like, he spends time in Afghanistan, and then after that his entire quest becomes, I need to become a better person because I feel responsible for the things that are happening now because of my technology. And so the fact that this movie established that and really made it a core part of Tony's character is what makes the rest of Tony's journey in the MCU feel earned and natural. And so, I mean, that's brilliant, and it's in stark contrast to Captain America, who is someone who's driven by like duty rather than by like fear and regret. And so it without us even really noticing, it sort of set in motion this story arc that Endgame then concludes. It's beautiful. I know. That wasn't even planned, is the thing.
Yeah.
Like the MCU is meticulously planned, but that can't have been planned. Like we didn't even know where they were going with Thanos until very recently. So, I mean, just the fact that they were able to give themselves so much to work with, it's an amazing film. Like,
well, and I think it, not to go too much on a tangent here, but that's why you got to give credit to Marcus and McFeely, because they've been around since the first Avengers, so they've been around from that beginning, so they know all that has kind of taken place and all of these character arcs and the best way to kind of further them. So
yeah, I think what they've managed to do is incredible because. And we'll talk about this a bit with Endgame and with Infinity War. But, the fact that they were able to... Not because, again, not everything was planned, but the fact that they were able to say, okay, this is the world that we were inheriting. Let's go back and sort of see what makes Tony Stark tick, what makes Captain America tick that was established in those first couple movies. How can we extrapolate on that and take it to the next logical place? And that is... If anything, that's more impressive than having like Kevin Feige just sort of say, this is where it's going all along. I think they deserve really credit for having like really figured out the next natural place to take each story. Really, the MCU would be fucked without them.
No, I totally agree with on that. Last two things I want to say is one, Terrence Howard will always be my favorite Rhodey. I think he just really got the character, and not that I don't like Don Cheadle, it's just there was something about Howard's kind of portrayal that really stuck with me. And the second thing is Jeff Bridges as Obadiah Stane. People shit on him and they say he's kind of forgettable and he's just like nothing. I love Jeff Bridges in that movie.
Great. Until he puts on the Ironmonger suit, he's fantastic.
Oh, he really is. I mean, there are just like so many subtle moments where he's just talking to Tony. He's got a cigar in his mouth. I mean, he literally chews the scenery. Like it just. Yeah,
he's great.
It's really good.
Obviously the whole like the hero faces the villainous version of themselves is kind of done to death, especially in Marvel movies, and so the Ironmonger thing gets a bit tedious, but. Before the Ironmonger thing, I think just the idea that Obadiah Stane is not so much the dark side of Tony, but just a manifestation of the thing that Tony is trying to leave behind. You know what I mean? He represents the old Tony Stark, and so that the fact that he has to then go and like overcome that as an obstacle in the film is really, really smart storytelling.
It's great. Yeah.
I mean, and you're right. Like like Jeff Bridges makes every second count. Like, I mean, there's a reason that 11 years later we're still quoting like built in a cave with a box of scraps. Like,
that's still just it is. That is like right up there with that's America's ass. Like those two lines may be my favorite lines in the entire MCU.
It's brilliant. But so that's Iron Man at number 10.
Okay, coming in at number 9.
10, or do we do my number? Oh, sorry,
You're number 9.
My number 9 is actually another one that you mentioned, so we can talk about it. Is Guardians of the Galaxy.
Okay, yeah, that was my number 12. All right, cool.
Yeah. Guardians of the Galaxy is, I mean, that whole franchise. This has been done to death, but it is such a special franchise in the MCU. I think it really has consistently been my favorite part of the MCU. In Phase 3, especially Phase 2 into Phase 3, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That first movie is a perfect example of how to be an exceptionally funny movie, but also like heartbreaking and very, very moving and impactful. Like, there are some goofy parts that I wish weren't in it. Like, I don't like the dance off at the end. And there are little moments, but I mean, that's minor stuff, really. Like, this movie works so hard. The fact that it makes these characters that even I, as a comic book reader, never gave a shit about. The fact that it makes them worthwhile and some of my favorite characters in the MCU is nothing short of amazing. The fact that it manages to capture a different... Like, it basically has defined what Cosmic Marvel is in the MCU. And it had such a strong vision for what that is. It's like Star Wars, but it's not at all. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. James Gunn just managed to create such a unique world and then populate it with characters that I care about, and managed to be one of the only directors today who's managed to make the whole like diegetic music in the movie using pop culture like songs work. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, I can't listen to what's it called? Ain't No Mountain High Enough. I can't listen to that song anymore without thinking of Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, I can't think of Come and Get Your Love without thinking of Guardians of the Galaxy. Those movies, like, I mean, everyone talks about Hooked on a Feeling. That's probably my least favorite song on the soundtrack. There are just so many great songs that have they're imbued with so much emotional resonance that it changes the way I view that art now forever. Uh-huh. And I think I can't overstate how great that is. Like,
no, and I completely agree.
I was gonna say at the very beginning, I mentioned that my one major criteria for the Marvel movies is make me feel something. Like, that's the real. I don't care if sometimes the storytelling's a bit spotty, or if sometimes they're incomplete stories because it's part of a larger narrative. Whatever. I read comic books. That's kind of how they are sometimes. But if you make me feel something, then you've done it. You've achieved the one thing I need. And this movie makes me feel so much more than almost any other Marvel movie. So, yeah.
No, I think you raise a lot of great points, and I completely agree with you. I think the only reason I have it a little bit lower is just because there are two, like, I would rather just rewatchability, you know, like I'd rather watch Iron Man in my number 10 more than I watch Guardians of the Galaxy, but there is something so heartfelt about that movie, about the family, this band of misfits getting together in a different way than the Avengers. Avengers are just like different people that are kind of just assembled as a team, whereas the Guardians of the Galaxy is truly a family of just people who found each other and need each other as much as the next person on their team. So it's so I love that whole dynamic. I think the humor, the comedy in the movie sometimes it doesn't work. A lot of the times it does work. It just but you hit the nail on the head in terms of James Gunn. It is such a visual and just like tonally it was unlike anything we'd really seen before when that film came out, and so James Gunn establishing the cosmic universe, but just establishing what it means to be a Guardians of the Galaxy film was really just kind of incredible. So those have been things that always stick with me.
Yeah, I mean, of all the MCU movies, I think other than like an Avengers movie, the Guardians of the Galaxy is one of those movies where, like, one of those franchises where outside, removed from the franchise, you can sort of say, oh, this is kind of like a Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Or this is kind of like a, you know, you can say that about an Avengers movie, but you can't really say that about like an Iron Man movie. Like they just, I think, as much as I love the Iron Man movies, they kind of they've shifted and changed so much, and they kind of are emulating other things to the point where it's like, okay, yeah, an Iron Man movie is a lot like this crossed with this, but a Guardians of the Galaxy movie is so unique that Hollywood is literally making other movies that are emulating it. Yeah, so,
and that's probably the biggest impact it had was just like its ability to inspire other creatives to, you know, tap into what James Gunn was doing. I mean, God, they have him doing
Ragnarok is literally a Guardians ripoff. Like,
yeah, it is. And you know, I mean, like I said, they got James Gunn to helm the next Suicide Squad. I mean, which is basically DC's version of the Guardians of the Galaxy. A little bit different, but you know, same kind of ragtag group of people.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it was trying to be DC's version of Guardians of the Galaxy.
He was definitely trying, yeah. But no, there's so much genuine emotion, heart, style, comedy, just great characters that pop off the screen. I mean, it's everything you could ever want in like this space adventure film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's like it because it is obviously inspired by. I didn't mean to say like Iron Man's inspired by other things, and Guardians isn't. Guardians is obviously inspired by like Star Wars and Flash Gordon and that kind of thing, and the comics obviously. But yeah, the fact that it just managed to take its inspiration but create something that feels wholly unlike anything else, like you were saying, is just great. It's so good. Yeah. I feel like I'm not being super substantive about this, but
but you know, it's been talked to death at, you know, nauseam.
It really
talked about
is,
to death. Yeah,
I mean, and then so I guess I should move on to my number 8.
Yes, your number 8. What's your number 8?
My number 8 is, and this is gonna be a little low for some people, but it is Avengers Infinity War.
Wow.
I mean, it's my top 10. I mean, needless to say that I really like this film.
Wow.
I didn't know when to put it at 7 or 8, but I ended up putting it at 8 because, and I think Endgame kind of put this into perspective for me. What I want from an Avengers movie is, and again, Infinity War is fantastic. It's a real good movie. So I don't want to sound like I'm shitting on it, but what I usually want from an Avengers movie, what makes these Avengers movies work for me, is the heroes, is like just seeing those characters grow, and I'm emotionally attached to those characters. And smartly, Infinity War is about Thanos, not about those characters, and it needed to be. That's what it was building up to, and the ending wouldn't have felt earned if you hadn't done that. So I get it, but when it comes to rewatching it, I'm kind of like, I'm not as emotionally invested in Thanos. Like, I really don't. They developed him as a great villain, and I'm glad they did. But on rewatch, it's just sort of like, I like these movies because I like to see my heroes struggling and doing heroic things and being the best versions of themselves, despite, you know, whatever's in their way. And that's in this movie a little bit, but not nearly enough for me to really want to go back and revisit it a ton. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's a great movie. It's tight. It's well written. It's really just that I prefer other movies over it. That it's here. I love the ending. A lot of people have a problem with like the nihilism of the ending, but I think that was such a really bold statement to make. Not as shocked. I mean, obviously they had to end the two-parter with something big, and so I'm not as shocked that they did it as other people. But it is a really powerful way to end your film, and it created I think the snap is one of those things that is going to be referenced in pop culture into our, like, you know, middle age and old age. Like, it's going to be one of those things like how you have the battle on the Death Star, or the end of Empire Strikes Back with Han being frozen in carbonite. It's going to be one of those big cultural things that you can use in shorthand now. You can say, oh yeah, the snap, like Thanos' snap, like that is something that everyone understands now. Yeah, and to say that is not an achievement would be underselling it. But yeah, just for me, I when I go to watch an Avengers movie, I really want to focus on those characters, and the characters I care about most, which are like Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, aren't really in this movie as much as some of the other characters. And so for me personally, doesn't have that same hook. It's still great, but it doesn't have the same hook that the other ones do. But
interesting.
Yeah,
Wow,
I don't know.
that's very, very interesting. Okay,
And
but I mean,
also, I want to also say that I also another criticism I hear, and this is not why I put it here. I know a lot of people have a problem with the movie sort of not refuting Thanos and his backwards stupid plan. And I agree the movie doesn't really counter-argue his point, but then Endgame does, so it kind of doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it doesn't.
So that's not really that. I just want to like make it clear that's not why this is here. Thanos does have a stupid plan, and if you think he's right, or if you think that his plan would solve the fucking problem, you need to really look into things, but and reevaluate some of your opinions. But that isn't the reason why it's here. There really isn't any problem with the movie. It's just I like the other movies a little bit more.
Sure.
So yeah.
Sure. No, I think that's a very valid point. You explained your reasons. It's just higher on my list. So
Yeah, of course.
okay, so I guess it's my turn.
Go for it.
Coming in at number 10 for me is The Avengers, the first Avengers movie. Which I know is much higher on your list. So
Yeah.
you want to wait and talk about that one, or?
I can wait. I mean, it's very high on my list. So
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I used to have this one below Iron Man, simply because I would rather rewatch Iron Man because I would always fall asleep in the middle of the Avengers movie because. And I still feel this way, but not to the same extent. I think that middle section is a bit of a lull. It kind of drags a bit too much. And then something else that I've just come to not like about the movie is the aesthetic. It feels very television, which it makes sense coming from someone like Joss Whedon, although we see that he can do more than that. But yeah, there's something about the visual look of the movie that I didn't like completely love. I don't hate it. It's just, it was fine. And I think as other movies have come out that have really just pushed this universe in a whole other direction, in a whole other stratosphere, I just don't. I would almost rather go back and watch some of those than this original Avengers film. That being said, this original Avengers film is monumental, not only in what it did for comic book movies, but it's, storytelling hasn't really been, like, having all these films build up to one, like, team culmination movie like this in Marvel's Phase 1, that hadn't been done before. And it wasn't just, oh my God, we're seeing all these heroes on screen for the first time. It was the way it was done. It was giving every character a moment to shine. It was giving them some great dialogue, some great interactions. Sometimes Joss Whedon's dialogue, I will say, though, gets a little too flowery for me, especially in terms of Loki, which I get is kind of what that character's about, but sometimes it got a little much. But yeah, I mean, Joss Whedon really established this team and brought to an incredible third act. I have to say the Battle of New York is one of the greatest like third acts I've ever seen up until recently. No, it's still up there. It's because it's just a lot of fun. It's just the Avengers kicking ass. Yeah, there's stakes involved, but ultimately it's what you paid your admission ticket to go see, which was the Avengers team up, unite, have these great splash page comic book moments, such as the circling around, Hulk punching that alien, Hulk, ragdolling Loki around, punching Thor. A lot of it revolves around Hulk because they use him in a good way in this movie, but
and they reintroduce him essentially. So.
They really did. Yeah, you got to look at a lot of things they did. They had to establish the team. They had to establish, Black Widow a little bit, Hawkeye a little bit, although he's kind of like pushed to the side in this film. But I get it. They had to bring in the Hulk. I mean, Joss Whedon had to do a lot with this movie, and ultimately he stuck the landing. And it's we get that Alan Silvestri score for the first time, creating one of the most iconic, not just superhero themes, just like themes in general of all time. So ultimately, there's not much else I can say about the film other than it's just a lot of fun. It is the perfect popcorn flick where there's great character moments. there's a lot more than what you would expect from a movie that is ultimately just a giant showdown. So yeah, I love it. I love watching the Avengers, and I always have a fun time doing so. So that's why that's a number 10.
Nice.
Coming in at number 9 was one that you, I think, mentioned earlier, and that is Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, this recently swapped. I originally had this at 8, but then I was thinking on it a little bit, and I was like, no, I would rather watch the movie I have in number 8 more than I'd want to watch Homecoming. But anyways, I mean, I think this is a great movie. We were talking about it before we started recording. It's probably the third best Spider-Man movie, yeah?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think, Spider-Man 3, I don't hate, but this is easily a much stronger movie than Spider-Man 3. But,
yeah, I know, for sure. No,
I don't hate Spider-Man Homecoming either, by the way. I have it squarely in the middle just because it's... You go first.
Well, I was just saying, the movie is very light. It's brisk. While it's ingrained in the MCU, a little too ingrained, which is for a Spider-Man film, which is part of my problem with it. It does still feel like its own. It does. The only real integration, I think, is the mentorship with Tony Stark, and then some of the stuff with the Vulture and whatnot. And I love
the way it's integrated into the MCU. Honestly, I think that's one of my favorite parts of it.
I agree. I agree. I think I like it's weird. I struggle with it. I like that. I like how it's integrated, but when I go back and I watch the other Spider-Man movies, I love how detached they're their own thing. You don't have to worry about being part of a universe. And so that's the thing I struggle with this movie. But if they're going to integrate it into the MCU, yes, I agree. They do it the right way. And ultimately, we get to see Spider-Man in high school for the first time as a kid, which is what, we haven't seen it before. It's something we've always wanted to see. It's part of the appeal to Spider-Man. He's juggling so many different things. He's being a kid, and he's someone that we can all relate to. And I think that Tom Holland really brings so much to this character, and his relationships with everyone. The guy has incredible chemistry with just about every single person in this movie, which I adore. And ultimately, it's fun. It's got that kind of John Hughes feel that they were trying to go for. I thought John Watts Watts. I forget his last name, but he was a great choice to kind of come in, because he had only done one movie, which was Cop Car, beforehand, but he really grasped what Kevin Feige and Marvel and Sony wanted to do with this character, how to revitalize him and integrate him into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mentioned briefly Peter's relationship with Tony. That is something that I love, which I know some people don't like, and they're like, well, that's why it feels too attached to the MCU. But to me, Tony is very much the Uncle Ben figure in the films that we've gotten him in, and so it's the mentorship, it's the lessons that he can pass down to him, and ultimately he helps Peter learn that he is Spider-Man. It's not the suit that makes him what it is. It's not all these extra things. The power and the drive and everything is inside him all along. And I think that's really brought to a head in that incredible moment after he's like, oh, I'm just gonna take out the Vulture because I can do it. And then he's kind of beaten down a little bit, and he has to just pick himself back up and do the difficult thing, which is stop the Vulture from doing whatever he's doing. I kind of forget his plan, but stopping Stark Industries or something like that, just kind of robbing them.
He's gonna heist some tech.
Yeah. Which speaking of the Vulture, I think Michael Keaton is excellent in this movie. He's one of the best MCU villains. Yeah. I completely agree.
I think for me personally, this one, it's great, and I think the one thing that kind of holds it back a little bit, and this is such a minor complaint, and I wouldn't begrudge anyone for overlooking it. I think for me personally, the one thing that kind of I wanted more of really is Peter struggling with that balance. I guess, because the classic Spider-Man struggle is that's
a good point. We don't necessarily see him struggle too much with that. Yeah,
because there was one scene that I loved, which was the one where he had to choose between going down and impressing everyone as I made Spider-Man show up, or he can go take care of the the anomaly going on with the Vulture's goons. And I love that he made the hard choice and he chose, I'm going to go do that. And that was great, and it ended up negatively affecting Peter a little bit. But there are a couple of the moments where, like the whole mathletes thing that's going on. The choice to be Spider-Man never really has any negative consequences. Liz is like a little mad at him, but then he just gets back on the team anyway. And it's all fine. So that's all fine. But I would have liked it if it had been a little more sort of, hey, being Spider-Man is going to be more of a burden than you think. But then again,
you get a little bit of that in that car ride with the Vulture and Liz.
You do get a little bit more of that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I like the way that they tied. I think that twist works so great because I think the greatest thing about Spider-Man and Spider-Man's villains is this idea that they are all just sort of like if Batman's villains are all like different sort of mental illnesses that he sort of has to that Batman also struggles with, then Spider-Man's villains are all sort of just like different variations of people with great power not using it responsibly. And so I like the idea of and also the fact that like it's like a soap opera, so like everyone's all sort of connected in some weird way. So the idea that Vulture was connected to him, that created problems for him, and so he can't have what he wants. That works really well. I just kind of wish that maybe, I don't know, maybe the movie was just a little more focused on that struggle. But then again, like you mentioned that Tony Stark is kind of the Uncle Ben character in this iteration of Spider-Man. He didn't really have his Uncle Ben dying moment yet.
Not in this movie.
Not in this movie, yes,
he
exactly.
had it in Endgame.
Exactly, and so that's kind of my thing. It's like, okay, so maybe he doesn't have to really struggle with this kind of thing, with maybe the downsides of being Spider-Man, but now it looks like in Far From Home, he's a little more reluctant to be Spider-Man. He was super eager to be Spider-Man, and now this thing has happened, and he's like, well, shit, I'm a little less keen on this now.
Well, I think that's just...
More, yeah, so I can kind of excuse it going forward if that's kind of the direction they're going in. Because, Spider-Man isn't always super keen about being Spider-Man, but he is in this movie, and I guess it makes sense contextually.
Well, I think it's because he's just a kid who got these new toys, and he's like, oh, I can officially be a superhero now because Iron Man said I could, So it's
without the Uncle Ben moment, I think that's kind of where this I think that's where this can now go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's like they extrapolated, that little the couple of pages from the comic book and a couple of scenes from the original Spider-Man where Spider-Man has the powers and Uncle Ben is still alive and he sort of just uses them to do what he wants. In the context of the MCU, doing what he wants means being a superhero, being an Avenger, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But now that he's had his Uncle Ben death, he's going to have that, just like in the comics and just like in the Raimi movies, he's going to have that sort of moment of, shit, this is a lot more damaging to my social life and to my emotional wellness than it would be if I just wasn't Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And so now I think going forward, we're going to see that struggle. And in that case, Homecoming works great as kind of an elongated version of that pre-Uncle Ben's death version of Spider-Man. But it's just... sometimes I wish there was more of a struggle, but that's just kind of what I get out of the character. Nothing really wrong with the movie itself.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing I will say, the last thing I'll say is that I wanted a bigger sense of New York, the Raimi films and the Amazing Spider-Man films, whatever your gripes are with them, you cannot deny that New York felt like a living, breathing character. And I never got a sense of that in this. It always felt like he was either on a soundstage or they were just showing some unremarkable section of New York. I want to see Spider-Man swinging through Manhattan, swinging through Times Square, stuff like that, going through this city like we've seen him do in every single iteration of the character. And I didn't get a sense of that in Homecoming. That kind of bugged me.
Queens in this one, but not you're right, not New York as a whole, which maybe was the point. But it's kind of a shame that the field trip wasn't just into the city and not to DC. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and that's kind of the problem I'm having with Far From Home is it's not even from my knowledge, it's not even taking place in New York. So,
it seems to be taking place in Europe mostly.
Yeah, so, I want to see Spider-Man in New York. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think, hopefully, maybe they're just betting on the fact that we've always seen Spider-Man in New York, but I'd like to see this Spider-Man in New York before we really branch out.
Yeah,
don't mind
I
branching
agree.
out, but maybe just, if the field trip had just been to New York and that would have been Spider-Man in a new place facing something different because he's from he's from Queens and he doesn't, I would assume he doesn't just go to Manhattan all the time.
No.
I think that would have served the exact same purpose without having to go to DC for some reason.
Yeah,
But,
for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean it is a very solid movie, and it's just a little above middle in my list for that reason. It's fun, it's great. I love the moment where Spider-Man has to lift up the rubble. That is
that's
probably the best
a great
scene
moment.
Tom Holland has had.
Yeah.
I love it. I think he's really good and he has potential, and this series has a lot of potential, but this one is just like, it's all right.
Yeah, okay, all right, yeah, fair enough. Okay, so moving on to my number 8. My number 8 is Captain America, the First Avenger.
What?
Yeah, where do you have yours?
Oh shit, it's much higher, but
Much higher. Oh fuck, man! Now you're getting me second guessing again. This happened last time.
it's not much higher, but
Okay.
it is a little higher.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I fucking love this movie so
I can't
much.
believe Civil War's above it.
Yeah. Well, I think the only reason why I put Civil War above it is because it's God, why did I put Civil War above it? No,
Great
I
question.
think Civil War tackles some thematic. It has more. While Civil War, which we'll get to soon, I think is uneven. It still has more thematic depth to it than the first Avenger, which I like.
No, that's fair.
But anyways, we'll just wait to talk about the first Avenger when it's on your list, because literally every single time we do this list, we just gush about that movie. It is so good. It is so underrated. There are only 2 other films that I find to be more underrated than that movie. So, anyways, that's my number 8. We'll get to that a little bit later on. So,
Sweet.
back to you. What's your 7 through 5?
Okay, my 7 is this is a little lower on your list, so we can talk about it now. Black Panther is number 7 for me.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one because I think for the same reason you sort of mentioned with Civil War, is I think Black Panther isn't, but not so much for the uneven. I think the movie's pretty even all the way through. I think it's not the most fun MCU movie. There are other movies that I'd rather watch just in terms of like pure entertainment value. I'd rather watch Homecoming rather than for pure entertainment level, like surface level stuff. But Black Panther for me is just such a tight, cohesive story with big ideas and a lot of really interesting stuff going on top of the fact that it is still entertaining. I don't know. I think it's a really, really special Phase 3 movie. I think we were talking about this beforehand. Phase 3, little hit or miss for me. But I think of all the Phase 3, other than like maybe one other or 2 others, had like such a strong vision. I was debating whether or not it should go above or below Infinity War. And I am still like not 100% certain on that where I've put it, but it's in one of those 2 spots. And I don't know, I just think like all the stuff with, it's basically a better version of Thor Ragnarok. Like,
yeah, it is.
It
I
takes
agree
the
with
same
that.
thematic material that was teased in Thor Ragnarok, and then they did nothing with it. And it says, you know what? We're gonna make a whole movie where we actually look at these subject matter, and we actually do something, and we don't just say like, oh, this is bad and this is good, and you need to just do the good thing instead of the bad thing. It was an actual conversation, and I think that's most evident in the fact that T'Challa learns from Killmonger, but he's also, right, and Killmonger is wrong. You know what I mean? Killmonger has things to impart on T'Challa, but he's not right. And I think that's what makes it so complex and interesting. And you could argue that, the movie doesn't really get going until he shows up in Wakanda, and that is definitely a point to be made. But I do like all the sort of the world building that is established beforehand, so that when he shows up and turns the world upside down in Wakanda, it feels a little more earned. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like one of those things where, going back to, you mentioned Captain Marvel, you kind of wish it had more time to sort of set up the story before we got into it. I think Black Panther would feel a lot like that if it didn't have that first act where you sort of establish the cultural traditions of Wakanda, establish how traditional and kind of old-fashioned Wakanda is, so that when Killmonger comes, you not only notice the changes that he's making, but you also sort of get like, oh yeah, this is kind of a backwards culture a little bit. Like, like it's super futuristic and they have a lot to sort of share with the world, but they're super isolationist. They kind of just, they instead of, taking responsibility on the world stage and actually, being a force for good, they just sort of decided we're not going to do anything. And that had a negative effect, which created a villain like Killmonger. And so, I think that first act is really vital. And it also establishes, like, sort of, I think all the stuff with Claw ties into it really nicely, because you've got Claw, who's this outsider who kind of represents the fear that Wakanda has. It's like, well, we've encountered outsiders before, and they just want to exploit us. Like, they just, like, Claw wants to take all our vibranium, and he's, a horrible, kind of a racist. We don't really get anything overtly racist from him, but you can kind of just assume he is. Just some of the more demeaning things he sort of says about Wakanda. You kind of get the idea that he isn't too reverent of them. And so he kind of embodies the fear that T'Challa's father and T'Challa have of engaging with the outside world in a kind of like meaningful way. And yeah, it kind of, Killmonger is that breaking point where he comes along and you go like, well, we can't just keep doing things the way we're doing them. And instead of just like getting advice from his father where he's like, ooh, Ghost Dad, tell me what to do. And he says like, oh, the power was within you all along, and you are, we're a people, not a place, and all this bullshit from Ragnarok. Instead of that, T'Challa has a vision with his father, the second vision, when he's like sort of, on life support. And he confronts his father and his ancestors. And he's like, no, you're wrong. What you did created this problem. And we can't just keep doing it that way. And I thought that was just such a, like, fuck yeah kind of moment. It's like, hell yeah, T'Challa actually learned something. Yeah. And he is now... And he didn't just learn it because of the good guys. He learned it from the bad guy. And it just makes the whole story feel so cohesive and rich and interesting. And yeah, there's some beats where it's like, this is dragging a little bit. But... overall, I think the overall package is just so good that I can't deny that it is one of the best Marvel movies. Like,
yeah, and I would probably say, from a story and thematic standpoint, it is. Ultimately, its placement on my list comes down to, one, rewatchability, and two, I just feel like I agree. I'm one of those people who's like, the movie doesn't really get started until Killmonger comes in. Yeah, all this stuff in Korea is cool, and like it's great getting introduced to the culture, but I wish they would have weaved the main story in through there a little bit more. I guess maybe I can't vocalize exactly what I'm trying to say, but that it's when Killmonger shows up, then I really get interested. But then like there's a period where like T'Challa is gone and the movie kind of like has this lull going on.
See, I thought that as well, but in my most recent rewatch, it kind of didn't feel as long as I kind of maybe felt in those first couple of viewings.
Yeah,
like where he's gone for a little bit, it kind of, you have some Killmonger scenes, and it's probably the best scene in the movie where Killmonger is talking to his dad.
Father. Yeah, well, I agree. I absolutely love that scene.
It's a beautiful scene, and then like we wouldn't really get a moment like that if there was like constant
right. If T'Challa was and like
T'Challa,
right,
so
right.
I think that lull allows Killmonger. Yeah, there are some moments with like Lupita Nyong'o's character where it's like she's stealing the thing back and it's like, oh, okay, and Angela Bassett's like, we have to leave, and that stuff, maybe could have been a little shorter, but I think also just that T'Challa's return kind of makes it feel like worth it. If anything, it should have been a little longer so that when he comes back, it feels like, oh shit, he's been gone for a while.
True. But, it's not necessarily the fact that he's gone for that period of time. It's just that like he's gone and nothing really happens. Like if he was gone and like all of the other side characters who I found vastly more interesting than T'Challa himself.
Really?
Yeah, I really did, which is a problem I have with the movie. I feel like he is overshadowed by everyone else in his own movie.
I think he's overshadowed a little bit by Killmonger, but I don't know if anyone else. I think he's
really. I think he's overshadowed by Shuri, by Lupita Nyong'o, by
they're all
Okoye.
great too. I think.
Yeah, like
I think they're all
just
fantastic.
Yeah.
I just think I don't know. I really gravitated to his arc. I thought, and maybe it's because I was a little sour on Ragnarok when I saw it, and I was like, this is exactly what I wanted from it.
Okay, yeah.
And so, yeah, maybe that's why. But I really, really dug his. I like that he was unsure of how to be king, a lot like Thor, but he was actually learning something about leadership.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
No, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I just have like the kind of the issues that I already mentioned, like the inconsistencies in pacing, and just and other stuff like that.
I think if there's one thing that Ragnarok has over Black Panther is that third act, because they
absolutely
in terms of like a battle. I mean, there's more interesting thematic and emotional and character stuff going on in Black Panther in the third act, but the actual battle itself is way more exciting in Ragnarok.
Yeah, that's the thing. I feel like it's some of the more epic moments. My God, if T'Challa had like that immigrant song moment in Ragnarok, holy shit, that third act would be incredible.
I think maybe it comes down to a bit like T'Challa's armor's a little overpowered in Black Panther.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
him absorbing all the punches and doing it has some cool moments, but there's never really any tension that like, oh shit, T'Challa's really. Maybe if like at the end when he came back, the armor didn't work as well or something like. Maybe
he basically had to use similar to something that happened in the Winter Soldier. He had to use the armor from Civil War.
Yes,
if something had happened like that, that would have been way more impactful.
Like maybe Everett Ross has it, and he's like, "Here, you can use this."
Yeah,
and I was like, "Okay," and he comes back, and it would have upped the stakes a little bit. That would have made the last fight a little. I mean, everyone has problems with the special effects. Yeah, fine, whatever. The special effects are bad in that scene, but that's not what makes the scene kind of less tense. I think it's just more of the story stuff. But
right.
So I do agree. That's why it's not like at the very top of my list, but. I know I just can't deny the stuff that works.
Sure, no, I completely understand that. No, absolutely. All right, what's your number 6?
Okay, now my number 6 is Captain America: The First Avenger.
Yes, I love this movie so much. This movie
is so fucking good.
It's so good.
It is. It's oh my god. It really talk about like going back to what I was saying about Iron Man. Talk about like sort of really establishing what about this character works and laying the groundwork for everything that's to come.
Yeah.
This movie is such a riot. It is like I really like pulp adventure. That is kind of my genre.
Sure.
So this is basically that. Directed by the man who is Mr. Pulp Adventure in this day and age, Joe Johnson.
Joe Johnson, man.
I mean, like literally like The Rocketeer and his work on Raiders of the Lost Ark, and he's involved in this world. And so you see that in this movie. It is very much inspired by those movies. And it's just so much fun. Like, yeah, you're right. It's not as thematically weighty as something like Civil War. But unlike Civil War, which I think we'll get to this when you mention it later on. But like, unlike Civil War, where it is trying to be like thematically weighty and sort of sometimes a little uneven because of it. This movie doesn't really try to do that. It's pretty black and white. It's the Nazis are bad or Hydra is bad and Captain America is good and he is going to overcome them, and that's the movie. And it does that perfectly. It does that without stumbling as much as Captain America Civil War. And it establishes one of my favorite, probably my favorite relationship in the MCU, which is Steve and Peggy.
Oh yeah.
And
yep.
Which is then beautifully paid off in Endgame. But and even in the other Captain America movies, it's this constant thread.
And in the Winter Soldier, one of my favorite scenes in the Winter Soldier is when he's having that conversation with old Peggy. Yeah.
And so I think it establishes that. I think Tommy Lee Jones as a side character is completely underrated.
My God, he's great. He's so good.
I love the scene where he's interrogating.
He's got the dinner. He's eating the steak. He's got the milk.
Yeah, and he's like,
oh man.
That whole scene, who's he talking to again? I forget
Zola.
Zola. That's it. Yeah, he's talking to Zola, and Zola's great. I loved how he was sort of just basically the Igor kind of character. He's like, oh, yes,
right,
master.
right. But
He's
as opposed
he's
to
also a little scared of Red Skull.
yeah, Red
So-
Skull. That's what I was about to say. As opposed to like an Igor kind of character, he like starts to like look at him. He's like, "You're going off the rails, man.
Like,
I gotta
you're
get
nuts.
out of
Yeah,
here."
exactly. And so I kind of like that, and like that doesn't make him a good guy. He's just
No.
It just makes Red Skull a worse guy. You know what I mean?
He's a
Like,
maniacal
so scary that
maniac.
Even the,
Yeah, he's just
even
a
the
maniac.
Nazi
Yeah.
scientist is a little bit like, ooh. I thought Red Skull was perfect as a camp pulp villain. I don't
Yeah.
think he needed to be too deep. I mean, he's just a Nazi. Like that's basically what he is.
Yeah,
And
well, he's
so-
worse than he's kind of worse than one, I guess, because the Nazis hated him.
He's just a Nazi who thought that he was the next step in evolution, and he thought
Yeah.
that like his so he basically had the same ideology just applied to him rather than the
Right.
Aryan race.
Yeah.
And so I thought he was about as deep as he needed to be.
Well, that's the thing. And the thing about Red Skull is not so much that he's got the depth to him, but can the person playing Red Skull elevate that character? And Hugo Weaving does that and more.
He does, yeah.
Like that's like Red Skull on the comic book page, very one note, very just like, okay, he's just a Nazi. And in the movie, he is that to an extent, but Hugo Weaving, he's so hammy, he's charismatic. And like I love his like encounters with Captain America. He's just like
Yeah, and he's
that
just so
first one where he's
unhinged.
like, Captain America, I am a big fan of your films. And I'm just like, oh my God.
It's such a great thing.
He
And like
chews it
I
up.
love like at the end of the montage, and we'll talk about the montage in a second, but like I just love at the end of the montage where he's like, you're failing.
Yes, I love that.
It's just so like the movie is inspired by those old adventure serials, and it is one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It feels like it, with a bigger budget, with bigger special effects, in the same way that Raiders of the Lost Ark was. It is, the villains are very one-dimensional on purpose, and the heroes aren't as one-dimensional as like maybe some of those older pulp heroes were, because Cap's got a lot of depth to him, and I think that's what makes him work. But he is still, despite his depth, he still has a very cut and dry sense of morality.
Right.
And the movie never tries to question whether or not he's right for that morality. He is right. Like, he is Captain America. He's just virtuous that way. And it's more about him questioning the world around him. Because you sort of throw him into a more realistic version of World War II, but you keep him the same. And that's beautiful. I think that works really well. There is a lot of people sometimes complain about the montage. They say, "Oh, we skipped over all the fun action of him like fighting in World War II." Personally, that never really bothered me. I was actually kind of surprised when people said that bothered them.
Yeah.
I think there was plenty of action in the movie. The big action set piece is that raid on the Hydra base, and obviously there's the finale as well. So it never really bothered me that that part kind of felt like one of those like wartime reels, where the newsreels where like you'd sort of see updates from the front line, like that kind of thing, but with Captain America. And that's really all I needed. We got some cool little like action shots. I don't need to see every single one of those scenes. I'm already invested in the story. I'm already invested in Captain America. I just need to know that he is, making advances on Hydra.
Well, exactly, and that's the thing. It's because basically, if they had showed those in greater detail, it would just be him doing what he did when he freed all those soldiers again and again. They were just Hydra-based raids. So I agree with you. I would have liked to see maybe a little more action, but like at the same time, it didn't need it, because that's not the point of the movie. It's a movie that has a story that happens to take place during World War II. It's not about the war,
Exactly, yeah. And I think, and I think there's plenty of good action anyway. Like, I mean,
there is.
The scene at the very end, the last action scene, I love the idea that, I mean, it's probably the last movie I saw in 3D, to be honest. And it probably has the best 3D shot I've ever seen, which is when he throws the shield and it ricochets and comes at the screen. Like,
me,
watching that in the theater, that's the only time I have ever gone, oh shit, when something happened in 3D. Because I kind of like ducked a little bit, because it was just, I wasn't expecting it. But yeah, no, I think there's like a lot of really cool moments. The choreography isn't as like fine-tuned as, say, Winter Soldiers, but and we'll talk about that when we talk about Winter Soldier, but like it kind of had like Indiana Jones fisticuffs kind of
a little bit,
choreography.
yeah.
And he's not a soldier. He's just a dude who's really strong.
Yeah.
Maybe as he goes on in his career, he becomes more, military trained, and that's why in Winter Soldier he's doing like commando kind of moves. But in this first one, he's just a dude who got superpowers, and then they didn't train him. They just put him on like display as a recruitment tool, and I loved that. I loved how they worked in the propaganda element.
I love that.
And I will every now and then I'll just like I'll start thinking about Star Spangled Man, and I just like hum it. It's such a good score.
Yeah.
And the way they worked in like punching Hitler and like suck old Adolf in the jaw. Like,
Oh yeah, it's great. It's so
good. It's so charming and endearing. I love this movie.
No,
It would
I
be higher
agree.
if everything else wasn't that good.
I agree. And I'm even questioning my placement of this film again now, because every time I talk about it, I'm just like, fuck, I love this movie.
Oh, it's good. I want to watch it tonight now.
I probably will too, even though I watched it semi recently. I love the first act of this movie so much because it sets up everything you need to know about Captain America, who he establishes who he is as a person. There are a lot of great moments in there, like him jumping on the grenade, him like stepping on like the light shining down on him and not being able to see his face in the military guys. And like his relationship with Bucky is set up there nicely, and you just get a feeling that this is a guy who genuinely wants to do good. He wants to help people. He wants to save people's lives. I mean, he says it in the film, he doesn't like bullies. He doesn't care, and that's what the Nazis were. And he's like, he knows from personal experience what it's like to be bullied. He's a very meek man in his kind of like physical attributes, not necessarily in his demeanor, but and he wants to be able to help other people from having to go through what he's gone through. And he's got a very strong heart and a very strong moral compass. And you see that is only amplified when he gets that super soldier serum. That's why it works with him, and it didn't work with someone like the Red Skull, like what Dr. Erskine was saying. Which, by the way, Stanley Tucci as Dr. Erskine may be maybe one of the greatest, just like kind of doctor side characters in one of these movies.
The MCU phase 1 of the MCU is so underrated for the number of like really great mentor characters.
Yeah.
Like I mean, I completely agree.
Well, that's the other thing, and I was talking about this recently. This movie's got one hell of a cast, man. You have Chris Evans coming hot off, no pun intended, but coming hot off of Fantastic Four. You've got Tommy Lee Jones. You've got Hugo Weaving. You have Stanley Tucci. You have
it's crazy,
like you have a bunch of other characters who would then go on to become bigger actors, like Haley Atwell. My God, what a just incredible actress she's become. And by the way, that show Agent Carter was canceled way too soon. That was an excellent show that really just kind of it honed in on what they were already doing with the first Avengers. So I kind of like that. You have shoot, I'm blanking on some other names here. There are a lot of people in this film.
I mean, there's a lot of what's his name? Toby.
Oh, Toby Jones is in this film.
Yeah, he's great.
He's right, yeah. But anyways, just kind of going back to that, it's got an incredible cast, and it's a lot of fun. I'm gonna say it's probably the film on this list I've rewatched the most. And I will probably continue to rewatch the most because it is so singular in what it's trying to do, and it's just so self-contained. Yeah, it's got that little tie-in at the end, and oh my God, that final line is heartbreaking.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But that aside, it is its own World War II adventure film with an incredible hero at the center of it. And it establishes my favorite character in the entire MCU.
Yeah,
perfectly.
No, it's my second favorite. It's a great film. And then I guess my number 5 tying into that, it's back to back because then my number 5
wait.
is,
What did you do your? Oh yes, your number 5. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, my number 5 going back to back with this is The Avengers, the first one.
Oh, okay, interesting.
And was that for a lot of the reasons you said? It's just such a great, earnest movie. I think it a lot like Age of Ultron, or like what I said about Age of Ultron, because this came first, is that Joss Whedon is just so good at making all the characters dynamic and bounce off of each other and have multiple different layered relationships with each other. And that was so important for this film. So yeah, there is like a lull in the middle technically because they're all just hanging out in the helicarrier. But I personally never get bored of it because it's just constantly the characters, like, growing and building off of each other.
Yeah.
And establishing what will be the dynamics that will define the rest of this universe. And so, yeah, I mean, and I think the finale is a testament to action cinema. It's one of the best third acts of any movie. Running blockbuster of this last century. It's great. And I think I don't want to repeat too much of what you were saying because I don't want to just, repeat ourselves. But it really is just a movie that works on every level, and it is fun, and it is... Loki's a great villain, and he builds off of what was established in the first Thor movie. And yeah, I know I have not really much negative to say about this movie. It's so much fun. And it kind of... I think almost it's the perfect follow-up to the first Avenger. I think this movie feels the most like the first Avenger. In terms of... Yeah, it kind of has that fun, pulpy kind of style to it, without being like a direct homage to 1940s action serials. It just kind of has that same sort of cadence. I don't know how to describe it, but it
probably helps that Alan Silvestri scored both films.
Absolutely,
it kind of just makes it feel a little
definitely. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah, and I think, but just in terms of the way it's written, there's just a lot of... It's fun, but it's not... See, the jokes never really get on my nerves on this one. I don't think...
No, they don't either for me.
I don't think the Whedonisms in the dialogue get on my nerves either. I think, like...
I think some
bouncy.
I agree. The dialogue is great. It's juicy. It's some of the best dialogue Tony Stark has ever had, except for a certain film we're going to talk about a little later on. But I don't know. There's some of this stuff that like people say some things, and I'm like, it sounds like it was written, and maybe that's just me.
Mean, that's true. Yeah,
but
that
like,
is true. That is a very Whedon thing, because he definitely writes like everyone's sort of got the right comeback locked and loaded. That kind of thing.
Or like some of Loki's dialogue is like super just like flower. Like when he's like yelling at Black Widow and stuff like that, and he calls her like a mewling queen. I'm just like, I get he's like theatrical and Shakespearean, but I like what? Like what is that?
I mean, for that didn't really bother me. That felt like
it doesn't
like
bother
an continuation
me.
Of the dialogue in Thor as well, because they all spoke a little more Shakespearean.
Yeah, I guess it. Yeah.
And. Yeah, I don't know. For me, I feel like, he does have his Whedonisms, but I think every character is well drawn enough that, like, not every character is quippy like Tony Stark. Tony Stark has his one-liners. Cap is very earnest, and he has his little one-liners, but they're different. They're very, very genuine and almost like unintentionally funny. And then you got Banner, who is he basically built Bruce Banner up from a character I did not give a shit about. In the comics, really, I was never really a big Hulk guy, and I didn't care about the first Hulk movie in this universe. And he managed to recreate the Hulk in a way that I was like, I get it now. I get that this character is interesting because of the inner turmoil, and he's kind of like, he's a little nuts. Like, he's not exactly the most balanced human being. You wouldn't be if you had this monster inside of you.
No.
And it played that in a way that was fun to watch, but also taken seriously. And so, I mean, he gets the standout moment with that, like Cap, that's my secret. I'm always angry. The moment, other than the, circling around the heroes moment. There are so many moments. But, it's great. I just, and like I mentioned before, with Infinity War, I love it. But what I go to these movies for is to watch the heroes be the heroes and, be tested and sometimes fail and sometimes struggle. And I'm okay with them failing in Infinity War, but Infinity War doesn't really feel like a movie about the Avengers. They just happen to be in a movie with Thanos.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, I'll counter that. I'll counter that a little bit later on.
For sure. I mean, that's not to say that they're like undercooked in that film. They are there and they are very well done. It's just the Avengers is all about the Avengers, and I love it. And it just it fills me with that kind of like almost. Maybe I'm just I'm a sentimental guy. It just fills me with that joy where I'm just like, this is beautiful, and almost makes me want to cry how beautiful it is.
Sure.
How like these heroes are so good. They're not perfect, but their heart's in the right place, and that's what fuels these movies for me. And this movie is the genesis of that.
Yeah.
It's undeniably a great film, and I don't think you were denying it either. So
no. It's
we're on
just,
the same page. I just like it a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys, for checking out part 1. Part 2 will be available in a matter of days. But as always, be sure to like Men vs. Movies on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter simply by searching Men vs. Movies. And lastly, if you like me specifically and you like what I have to say, you can give me a follow on Twitter at Griff Schiller. All right, that's gonna do it for part 1, and we'll see you in part 2. Take care.